Hello, this is Andrea, and I am going to present a case to you today. The case that I am focusing on today is a family that has a mother and father not married, and a son who's 4 years old, and he has been in DFS custody since May of 2016. Both parents were arrested on drug charges and drug trafficking charges, and were sentenced to 5 to 7 years in the women's pen and the men's pen penitentiary here in Wyoming. Recently, at the last MDT review with the judge changed the permanency plan to include two goals. One, of course, unification, since he has not been in custody for 18 months yet. And two, to have it run concurrently as an adoption permanency plan. Because of this, we're having to kind of run two goals at once. Part of the reason the judge has indicated that he wants to focus on the adoption aspect is because this mother has had several children removed from her custody and rights terminated. At least 5 children that we can document. She says 6, but regardless, it's evident that in the past she's had issues. So to make a child wait for 5 years in custody in a foster home and be at the age of 9 when his mom is released from prison to only attempt unification with possibly negative outcomes and unsuccessful. Yeah, is really a long time for him to have to wait. And in Wyoming, they have the 18 out of 22 rule, which indicates that if out of the last 18 months the child has been in custody, or out of the last 22 months the child has been in custody for 18 months, then you can start the process of parental right termination for adoption as a permanency goal. So it's pretty obvious that he's going to probably be in custody for 18 months. However, we haven't reached that yet, so to rule out unification at this point is not really optional. We had a meeting recently that the foster mom requested to have with his therapist because she was noticing that after he was meeting with a therapist, and specifically on the visits where the letters from the mom and the dad were being read to him, of course not word for word, because some things were inappropriate or not age appropriate for him to read, but after these visits, and we're talking about a lot of letters. I mean, we honestly get 1 to 2 a week, if not more, from this mom dad from jail. And so, they would stack up, and she would have to try to read through them. And most of them say pretty much the same thing. And so, when he would get these read to him, he would come home and kind of be a wreck or a mess and have difficulty following directions and lashing out and showing a lot of anger. And so the foster mom was concerned that this was causing him more trauma. And when we met with her and the therapist, we had to kind of explain to her that this is part of the process of trying to move towards unification, in order to document that it shouldn't happen. Unfortunately, we have to have some things that we can list that while we're dealing with this stuff, this is what's happening. And so, of course, we suggested that she keep documentation and write everything down. And talking about moving towards the next step of, showing him pictures of his parents and seeing how he reacts to those. The therapist seemed to be a little bit uncomfortable dealing with the foster parents and kind of standoffish as far as providing them with the information that they needed to explaining what she was discussing with him, those kind of things, so that they kind of would have some ammunition, I guess, to deal with the outbursts and things when he returned home. The foster mom felt like she was helpless to help him because she didn't know what he was upset about or what had happened. And so we kind of negotiated an agreement that, while the letters were read, that the foster mom could be in the therapy session so she at least knew what they had told him. And, it kind of got to a point where it seemed like it was somewhat resolved. But after the therapist left, then the foster parents shared with us that in the previous year or year to 2 years, that the therapist's son was actually bullying their son at school, and they had to have several meetings with the principal and, of course, any parent who is having their child bullied. It's not going to be a good working relationship. So we had, discussed at that point what would be the best choice for the child, because he had created a bond with the therapist and felt comfortable with the therapist at this point. However, the therapist was not supporting the needs of the foster parents, and the foster parents were not really comfortable with bringing questions to the therapist. So that working part of the relationship was not working. And, so that was the puzzling question at first, was, do we move this child into a different therapist because it's not working for the foster parents? Is that a good choice? Or, as long as it's working well for him, do we just leave things be? And within the next 24 hours, we got a call from the therapist who was very upset and basically indicated that she didn't feel like she could support this child anymore, and that she didn't know what to do, but she was just feeling very conflicted with the situation. And so that kind of solved a little bit of the problem, but the concern that they had was that would this set him back? Is this going to slow the process of therapy? And and then of course the question is, well, who do you get for a therapist, and who do you get that can get the child in right away, because we don't want to be missing sessions. And so there was a conversation around this aspect with the therapist, and eventually she basically said she wasn't going to be able to do this anymore, and that she would facilitate a transition to another therapist for him that maybe would be a better fit for the family also. And so it was kind of a tough situation to be in, because we're trying to navigate everybody's personal comfort levels with their feelings, and then balancing it with the child's needs. And we did eventually find another therapist that hopefully will work out good. But the question I have is, what would have been the appropriate decision with that situation, in order to, make sure that the child's needs were the first thing that was met? And is it not okay if the foster parents are not getting supported? Is that really okay for the child? Or are we just kind of sugarcoating it and saying it'll all work out? So that was my question. What do you think that we should have done if the therapist didn't withdraw from the case? Should we have just let things ride, or should we search for a new therapist and move the child over, and hopefully have a better fit or more success or a comfort level with the foster parents that was a better working relationship? Thank you for listening to my case, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say about the choice that we made, if it was the right one, or maybe we should have tried to stick with that therapist.